Hey, welcome back to Bob's Two-Car Garage. Now, today we're down in beautiful San Juan Capistrano, California. Last week, we made this deck that you see behind me. And this week, we made these steps. Stick around, I'm going to show you how to make steps. Hi, my name is Bob, and I love my two-car garage. Now, before we get too far along in this presentation, I want to clarify some terminology that's really important. And sometimes I got it right in my brain, but it doesn't come out right in my mouth. So I want to make sure you get it so that you're not too confused as I speak through this whole thing. First of all, when we're creating a stairway, you have to know two things first. That is the rise, that is the distance from the top of the deck to where the stringer ends, but not at a diagonal. You have to come straight out, level on the deck, and then straight down. So when I come straight down, how far is it? And that could be different when I get out here because of the grade. The other term that you need to know is what's called the run. And the run is coming straight out this way. Where do you want that to end? So we have the rise and we have the run, which is straight out that way. The rise is straight down that way, but out here, if you get that. Also, each of the steps is called a tread. So if you hear me say tread, I mean step. Each of these vertical pieces that go between the steps, that's called a riser. But sometimes I just say rise. So if you hear me say rise and it's less than 39 inches, you'll know that I'm talking about the individual rise rather than the total rise. So we got the rise, the run, the tread, the riser, and then the last thing is the zigzaggy piece that holds all the steps together, and that's called the stringer. Now, the first thing you got to do is figure out the run and the rise that you need for your stairway, and that's going to determine the size of each tread and the size of each rise, which can get kind of complicated, but I'm going to try to show you how to do it in an easy way. Now, you can go to places like Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, and they will sell you a standard size stringer, it's called, that you could use. But then you're going to end up with one step, probably your bottom step, that's a little bit off, and you want them to be all the same. So it's better if you learn how to cut the stringer yourself, and that's what I'm going to try to show you how to do. Now, the run is the easy part because, well, it's just easy. I want my step to be 14 inches deep. Now, the minimum is 11 inches, but I want mine to be a little bit deeper because I got a bunch of dirt down here and I want to use up as much of that dirt as possible. So I'm going to go with a 14-inch tread. Now, that means I'm going to come out, I'm going to have 5 steps, so that means I'm going to come out 70 inches. The rise is a little bit trickier. So to figure out my rise, what I did is I constructed a board that came out this way, level with the top of the deck, and then I'm going to measure down from there to the grade. Now, from one side to the other, it's a little bit different, so I'm going to have to find a happy medium. As a matter of fact, I know that it's about 39 inches, so that's what I'm going with for my rise. Now, it's important to note that if you're doing it on a grade like this, where it's not level at all, there's going to be a difference between where the stairway starts and where it ends. And you're going to have to figure that out. You can lay out a board or whatever, but somehow you got to figure out what's your rise between the top of that deck and the grade or whatever surface you're working to. Okay, so I got 5 steps, but I have 6 rises. So the top of the deck is actually another step, or it's another rise. So I'm going to take 39 and I'm going to divide it by 6, and that's going to give me 6.5, which I just kind of got lucky because usually it doesn't come out that even. And then you need to get some of these little guys or something to clamp on to your carpenter's square. I've got these little points that were made specifically for this, and I can take these little guys and I can clamp them onto my carpenter square or my framing square in order to lay out that 14-inch tread and that 6.5-inch rise on my stringer or my piece of wood. So with my trammel points, I have this one that's going to set my rise at 6.5 on the outside of my framing square, and I have this one set at 14 on the other side of my framing square. That's going to allow me to lay out my rise and my run all along this 2x12 stringer. 6.5-inch rise, 14-inch run. Then I'll just slide my framing square down to the next step and do the same thing. And I'm going to do that 5 more times. One, two, three, 4, 5. All right, well, this is where it gets kind of confusing for me sometimes. I got my rise and my run. That's 14 inches by 6.5 inches. But I need to remember that this is the top of my tread. So I need to subtract some wood right there to allow for my tread. And I'm using Trex, which is 1 inch thick. So I'm gonna come off this tread line here and I'm gonna subtract 1 inch all the way down for all 5 steps. And that's where I'm gonna make my cut. Now I can use my 1 inch mark here on my framing square to make that subtraction. So using the same trammel points and the same trammel points or the trammel points in the same position, and then I'm just subtracting 1 inch off that tread line. And I'm doing that all the way down off of all 5 steps. All right, a couple notes about cutting these stringers. First of all, you can cut 2 at once, or at least you can get them exactly the same by attaching 2 together and cutting as far as you can. It'll leave a mark on the next one, and then you got a pattern for cutting the next one, and they're exactly the same. I have 5 of them to cut, so I'm going to do them in pairs, and I'm going to put those pairs right next to each other. So if there is any variation in my cutting, then it's not going to be as noticeable. Now, the second thing is I'm using Trex for decking, and it's really flexible. So you've got to be as careful as you can when you're using this plastic or Trex decking to get these stringers cut very accurately. So I'm really taking my time, going real slow as I cut out each of these 5 stringers. I want them to be as close to perfect as possible. So now when I take this apart, I got 2 that are matched. They're like almost perfect. Watch this. So now all I got to do is follow those cuts that I made partially through, and I got 2 matching pair. I think it's very cool. Now, of course, the corner of each stringer needed to be cleaned out, and I just did that with a jigsaw, but you could do it a lot of different ways. You could do it with a handsaw or a sawzall or whatever, but you need to clean this out somehow because you're not going to make that with the skill saw. If you go too far with the skill saw, then it's going to weaken this point right here. Now, after you cut out the stringer, by the way, you're supposed to have 5 inches left between the bottom of the stringer and where that step terminates. I'm pretty close. I'm not going to tell you how close, but I'm close enough. If you're not close enough, you can just reinforce the back side of that stringer by attaching a 2x4 to the back side. To establish the position of the stringer on the top side, I just measure from here to there. And in this case, that's 7.5 inches. From the top of the deck to the top of that first tread on the stringer. To position my stringer on the bottom side, I need to measure 39 inches down from the top of the deck way over on this side. So that's kind of tricky, but you can do that by just throwing out a board and putting a level on it and measuring off that board. You could also just use a little level on each of the steps, but that's not going to be as accurate because there's probably going to be some irregularities in some of your cuts. So it's better to actually measure straight down on the top, straight down on the bottom. Okay, I want to show you here what we did here at the bottom. It's important that you have it locked in at the top and at the bottom. So on the bottom side here, we ran a treated 2x4. Had to do a little excavation here to make it work. We're going to screw it to either end. The stringer's on each end. And then in the middle, on the stringers that are in the middle, we cut some little notches. And those little notches are going to lock into that piece that we put across the bottom. That's going to keep things nice and steady and locked in on the bottom side. On the top side of your stringer here, you can see that we don't have anything supporting it back here. We can screw it to the post, but really it needs support from the back side. So we made some little L blocks. They're going to fit in here, and I'm going to let these guys do the dirty work. They're going to climb underneath, screw it to the bottom side, and that's going to give us support on the top as well. All 5 stringers that we cut needed to be securely attached to the top side. And we did that by adding a block in between some of those stringers so that we had something to screw to. Piece that we dropped off the beam, and then we're going to attach our stringer. That makes that one a little low, but let's check this out down here. I also double checked with a straight edge just to make sure that it was perfect and to see how well I cut those stringers. I was actually within 1/8 of an inch at most, and most were better, so I'm okay with that. Most of them were right on, they were perfect. Block here, block that one that way. And we'll just do blocks just like we did before. Put a block there and a block there. Okay, so just to clarify here and to summarize, down here at the bottom we ran a 2x4 that's going to lock the bottom together here. We notched the 3 middle ones, then we screwed the outside stringer from the outside of the stringer into the 2x4. So this locks it in down here. We're going to pour some concrete down in this little hole, stick a bolt through there, and that'll lock the bottom in. Okay, so sometimes when you're out here in the dirt, you got to improvise a little. It'd be nice if we had something to anchor to, like a slab or something like that, but we don't. And I don't have proper anchors, so I'm just going to use a bolt. It's going to work great. I dug a little hole right here. Coming from the bottom with my bolt. Just going to bring it up from the bottom like this. Put a washer on it. Put a nut on it. Like so. And then we're just going to fill that up with concrete down there. And that bolt is going to serve like an anchor so that all these stringers are locked in place. Just a little side note here about stringers. Sometimes this happens because of the grain of the wood. So you want to pick out material that doesn't have a bunch of cracks in it. There are ways that you can fix it. You can put a screw in from the top, or what we're going to do is we're going to take this little piece of wood right here and we're just going to slap it on the side, screw it down, and strengthen up that stringer. Once you get all the risers and treads in, it won't be a problem, but it is a problem when you're putting things together. So it gets to be fun from here. This is the fun part, putting 3 treads in here and a riser. This riser will perfectly fit in here, and then we had to rip one of our treads down, cut about an inch off of it, so that we end up with our 14-inch tread and our 6.5-inch rise. Here we go. We're going to start laying down treads and risers. Now occasionally I use some plastic shims to make each of my stringers perfect, and also like you can do that under each of the treads or each of the steps. You shouldn't have to do that, but with this plastic decking, the Trex decking, it is pretty flexible, so when you look down it, you want it to be nice and straight. I think I maybe used 1 or 2 shims the whole time. The rest of it looked fine. Now the screws that come with this Trex decking look really good. You can hardly tell when you're done that they're there. Nevertheless, we took our time and lined each of those screws up nice and straight. Really doesn't have anything to do with functionality because it's going to hold anyway, but it just kind of makes you feel better when you're all done if those screws are lined up nice and straight. They also make a little plastic plug and a countersink drill if you want to make this Trex stuff look flawless. Alright, so around these posts right here, of course we need to notch out a little bit to make our decking fit the post. So we laid it out right here and we're going to cut out our little notch. Just like that. Looky there. So we got our treads and our risers all screwed down. Last thing we're going to do is put our rails on. So we got that laid out with a 2x4 like that. Height of the rail needs to be 34 to 38 inches off of the nose of each tread. We're making it about 37 inches, so we're making it a little bit high. But we laid it out with a 2x4 and just really trial and error as far as the height goes. So laid that up there, moved it up and down and got it even all the way across. Also a good idea to kind of take a look at your mock-up and make sure that the 2 rails are parallel to each other, because it's going to look funny if they're not. Now, you need to cut an angle on this post right here, so which is not an easy thing to do. So I'm really glad I got my big monster saw right here. I'm gonna cut that off, and hopefully I'm gonna do a good job. If not, I have a sander, so we'll make it perfect. Look at that. Woo! So up on the top side of the rail right here, I cut this little block, put some bevels on it so it looks a little prettier. And this is going to get tucked right up in there like that. And it's going to hold the top side of the rail in. And screw it this way and screw it that way. It's going to look nice and solid. It's getting a little complicated looking up here, but it's going to work pretty well. We could wrap the rail actually around the post, but I don't know, I just didn't want to go there. So this is what we're doing. And it's going to be good and strong, and it's going to look kind of pretty. That's also, you don't have to necessarily put 10 line tight, but you don't have to have yours tight by 10. So the true test when you build a stairway is how does it feel when you walk up? It should feel normal, natural. Definitely shouldn't make you stumble. So let's give it a try. That's a nice stairway. One thing that I might do differently if I were to do this project again is this little corner right here where the handrail comes into the post at the top. Looks a little busy to me. I just put a block right there and then screwed the handrail to the top of that block. That could have been done differently. I could have mortised it into the post and that would have been a little cleaner. I could have wrapped the handrail around the post and that would have been cleaner still, but it's still nice and strong. There's always something that you figure later that you could do better, so I'm still happy. So I want to leave you today with this proverb that says, all hard work brings profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Building steps is one of the more advanced things when it comes to carpentry, but you can do this. Work hard at it. You're smart enough. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.